smoke has a taste. Only those who have stood inside a burning inferno understand it. And Jack Harland understood. 30 years in heavy fire gear had given him more than his share: the tang of melting plastic, the sting of burning fabric, the bitterness of rotting wood, the acrid bite of family photos and children's toys turning to ash. Each kind of smoke carried its own flavor, but tonight, the sharpness scraping his throat was unmistakable. Kerosene. Jack froze at the edge of his orchard, where the rows of red delicious stretched straight toward the Texas sunset. The late autumn air was dry, the southwest wind kicking dust in his face, and to the east flames surged in a fierce orange line. It wasn't spreading like a natural grass fire, it erupted, rooted, screamed. Jack didn't need a second look, this was no accident. He ran back to his old pickup, yanked a battered radio from the glove box, left over from his days captaining Engine 12. His voice came out hoarse, decisive, no hesitation. "This is Jack Harland reporting a fire at Harland Orchard, Oak Hollow Lane, bordering Willow Creek. Heavy leaf fall, dry conditions, suspect kerosene. Roll the trucks now." The dispatcher on the other end hesitated for only a beat, then confirmed. They knew his voice. A lifetime of firefighting, dragging men, women, and children out of burning homes. Once, he'd carried a blonde-haired girl down a collapsing staircase, saving an entire wealthy suburban family. The papers called him Austin's black hero. But Jack remembered the truth. 3 weeks later, when he met them in the grocery store, they dodged his eyes, offering only the kind of curt nod you'd give a janitor. Buddy, the old bloodhound, growled at Jack's feet, pawing the dirt into dust clouds. The dog smelled the betrayal curling in the smoke. And that's when Jack saw her. Margaret Voss stood across the split-rail fence dividing his orchard from the manicured perfection of Willow Creek. Her white blouse was crisp, her arms folded as if she were judging a pie contest. No shock, no panic, just a thin, smug curl at her lips. Firelight flickered in her eyes, and Jack shivered. Folks in town called her Maggie the menace behind closed doors. To her face, they said Mrs. Voss with forced smiles. She ran the HOA, the homeowners association that dictated paint colors, fence heights, even flower choices. Jack knew she didn't need gasoline or matches to hurt him. Margaret's real weapons were fines and closed-door meetings. But tonight, when he saw fire reflected in those cold eyes, he knew she'd chosen something older: flame. Sirens wailed, slicing the night. Fire engines barreled down the dirt road, red strobes cutting through smoke. Buddy barked furiously, backing up. Jack raised a hand as a familiar figure climbed from the cab: Ramirez, the rookie he'd trained years ago. Ramirez squinted at the blaze. The burn line was too straight, no wind, no drifting embers. He turned to Jack, voice low. "This isn't natural, Jack." The crew sprang into action. Foam surged from hoses, blanketing the flames. Jack forgot he was retired, barking angles, shouting to protect the water line. Old habits took over. But when the smoke cleared, something on the ground froze him: a dented metal gas can, half melted, still reeking of fuel. Jack bent, leather gloves squeezing the warped handle. The weight hit like truth. Someone had set this fire. He lifted his eyes, scanning. Margaret's glossy black Escalade was gone from her drive, tire marks gouged deep like she'd sped off. But evidence doesn't lie: a trail of kerosene bleeding through her rose beds, a footprint pressed hard into damp soil. That night, after the trucks had gone, Jack walked the fence line with his flashlight. The orchard lay silent, the eastern grove black skeletons. Buddy padded beside him, whining softly, nose nudging burned fruit like shriveled hearts. Jack didn't cry. He'd seen too many houses burn, too many screams and smoke. Instead, he took notes, snapped photos, marked every scar. He knew justice didn't care about tears. It cared about proof. Jack didn't sleep that night. The fire was out, but the smell of kerosene clung to the air, seeping into every breath. He lay on his old wooden bed while Buddy curled on the floor, eyes still open, growling low whenever wind slipped through the cracks. Jack knew this wasn't just arson. It was a message. He sat up, poured a cup of cold coffee, yellow light spilling across a wall lined with mementos. Up top, a framed commendation still hung, a medal for heroic action. Jack remembered the day when he'd risked his life rushing into a collapsing house to pull out 3 white children. The papers called him Austin's black hero. The city cheered, pinned medals, shook his hand, snapped photos. But weeks later, in plain clothes at the grocery store, the father of that very family gave him only a curt nod, the kind you'd give a security guard. The sting burned hotter than the flames ever had. Jack had grown used to looks like that. In the firehouse, brothers respected him, they had to. Inside a blaze, color didn't matter, only survival did. But outside, society still drew its lines. And now those lines stood tall, painted white, nailed into fences, stamped with the HOA's seal at Willow Creek. Willow Creek had been built about 10 years earlier, on what used to be farmland. Gleaming houses with red tile roofs, lawns clipped like showroom carpets. The HOA was born alongside it, promising to preserve community beauty. But Jack knew the truth behind the slogans. It was about deciding who belonged. His orchard had been there long before Willow Creek. His father, and his grandfather before him, had sweated into that soil. When Jack retired from the fire service, he came back to take over the orchard. To him, it wasn't just land. It was roots, memory, proof of a black family's persistence through decades of exclusion. To Margaret Voss, though, it was a thorn. The first letters in Jack's mailbox sounded polite. Dear Mr. Harland, we've noticed old wooden ladders left outside may affect neighborhood appearance, or, several residents have complained about harvest machinery noise in the early mornings. Jack read them, sighed, crumpled them, and tossed them into the trash. He'd heard that tone his whole life. But letters turned to fines. Fines turned to rumors. One day, an anonymous post appeared on the neighborhood app. Harland Orchard is a fire hazard. Too many dry leaves, outdated equipment, one spark and the place goes up. Comments piled on, dangerous for the kids. Doesn't meet community standards. Jack stayed silent, took screenshots, filed them away. Silence didn't mean surrender. At the next HOA meeting, tension snapped. The room was polished, chairs lined straight. Margaret sat in the center, pearls at her throat, her voice sweet as honey, her eyes cold as steel. We're here tonight to discuss the orchard, she began. Some residents feel it's unsafe, not aligned with our community's vision. Jack rose. His shoulders still carried a firefighter's weight. His voice was low, steady. That land has belonged to my family since long before Willow Creek. I grow apples legally, with all the paperwork. If ripe fruit is considered unsafe, maybe your definition of safety needs work. A few chuckles rippled, but died when Margaret's eyes swept the room. She tilted her head, lips curling faintly. Mr. Harland, we respect your past, but the past doesn't always fit the present. Willow Creek needs standards. Jack locked eyes with her. Whose standards? Silence fell heavy across the room. That night, Jack came home burning inside. Buddy barked wildly at the gate. Someone had tossed a garbage bag into the yard. Inside was a crumpled note, sell the land. Willow Creek isn't for people like you. Jack slid the paper into his pocket. He'd heard those words his whole life. But he also knew, this fire wasn't stopping at words. After that meeting, things didn't stop at letters or fines. Willow Creek found other ways to speak to Jack. One morning, he found 2 tires on his pickup slashed. The cuts were clean, sharp, no accident. Jack quietly replaced them, never calling the police. Years as a firefighter had taught him, without proof, reporting only makes you look like trouble. Another afternoon, while checking the fence, Buddy growled ferociously. At the creek at the back of the orchard, water shimmered with an oily film, stinking of chemicals. Someone had dumped industrial trash, old paint cans, broken plastic, even pesticide bottles. Jack stood still, fists clenched. This wasn't mischief. This was a crime. Rumors spread faster than flames. On the neighborhood app, an anonymous account kept posting, Harland Orchard is a ticking time bomb. He's stockpiling fuel and chemicals, dangerous for kids. Who'd want to buy a house next to that stink? Comments split in two. Some defended him, he was a firefighter, he'd never be stupid enough to let his orchard become a hazard. But more whispers said, where there's smoke, there's fire. Jack didn't argue. He logged everything, screenshots filed into a folder that grew heavier each day. One night, checking the barn, Jack saw Buddy snarl. A flashlight blinked near the fence then vanished. Jack swung his floodlight, ran, but only caught the shadow of a black SUV vanishing at the bend. That night, he brought back the old scarecrow, Jenkins, the one his father once stuck in the field. But this Jenkins wore new clothes, a thermal camera, infrared motion sensors, backup batteries. Jack patted the straw shoulder, whispered, watch the orchard for me. Buddy sat beside him, panting, as if he understood his new partner's duty. Then came the night that sealed everything. Around 2 a.m., the sensor beeped. Jack jolted awake, heart pounding. On the monitor, heat signatures glowed red, human body in the cold night. A figure slipped through the fence, bent low, carrying something heavy. The camera caught every move, pouring liquid at 3 apple trunks, striking a lighter, standing back to watch. Flames burst in 3 red blooms. Heat shimmered the lens. Jack held his breath. That stiff stride, that rigid spine, he'd seen it 100 times at HOA meetings. And on the sleeve, reflecting firelight, a flash of blue. The same synthetic blue jacket Margaret Voss wore every morning on her jog. A Buddy growled underfoot. Jack pressed a hand on the dog's head, steadying him. Not tonight, Buddy. Proof is the weapon. By morning, the forum was ablaze again. Someone saw fire at Harland's orchard. He's a danger for real. Below it, we told you. He'll burn the whole neighborhood down. Jack gave a dry laugh. He printed every frame from the camera, clipped them into a file. He knew it was time to play his hand. But not everyone stood with him, and Donna, the silver-haired widow next door, shuffled to the fence, hands trembling. Jack. I believe you. But people are saying your cameras invade privacy. They face our homes. They're scared you're filming their families. Jack's fists tightened. I put them up to protect my land. Without them, how would I catch the arsonist? Donna lowered her gaze. I know. But you understand, they'll latch onto that. They'll call you a creep. And, some will believe it. Jack stared at her, eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. Without proof, what would they say? That I burned my own orchard just to blame her. Donna said nothing. Buddy barked, breaking the silence. Jack's eyes lifted to the white HOA sign at Willow Creek's gate, preserve harmony and safety for the community. He gave a dry, bitter laugh. To him, harmony now smelled of smoke and kerosene. He knew, the fight had only just begun. The next morning, Jack called Robert Clean, his old friend and lawyer, a former Marine. Robert's voice came over the line, rough and steady. Jack, sit tight. Don't do anything rash. I'll get in touch with fire investigator Marshall Tate. He's cracked bigger arson cases in the next county. A day later, Tate's gray pickup rumbled down the dirt lane into the orchard. He stepped out in a plain shirt, face weathered, eyes sharp. Jack led him along the fence. Tate crouched, switched on a UV light. Under the purple glow, kerosene streaks lit up like blood. With tweezers, he plucked out scraps of blue nylon fused with ash, sealed them in an evidence bag, then he pointed at the ground, a woman's shoe print, size 7 or 8. Jack said nothing, but Margaret's morning jog and her blue windbreaker flashed in his mind. Meanwhile, the neighborhood app erupted. One account posted, "Why is it always Harlan's orchard that burns? We warned you." Replies came fast. He used to be a firefighter. He knows exactly how to stage a scene. Maybe he lit it himself to play the race card. A scarecrow with cameras? That's sick. No, I trust Harlan. No one's that reckless. The community split in two, words cutting like knives. Jack read every post, screenshot them, printed them, and filed them away. His folder grew heavier. The next HOA meeting overflowed. Margaret sat in the center, pearls gleaming, her smile pasted on. We need to discuss security, she began smoothly. Some residents complain Mr. Harlan's cameras face their homes. This is a serious invasion of privacy, murmurs rippled. A man stood up. I don't want to be filmed walking my kid to school. Who knows what he does with those videos? Jack rose, voice low and firm. I installed cameras to protect my land. And because of them, I have proof of arson. Margaret tilted her head, lips curling. Arson? How convenient. Looks more like a stunt to me. A young woman interjected. But if there really is an arsonist, Mr. Harlan's footage is important. We should be grateful. A harsh voice cut her off. You're naive. He just wants to play the victim. Chaos erupted, voices colliding. Jack inhaled deeply, then spoke. You want truth? I have video. But it'll go to court, not to this mob. The room fell silent. Margaret's painted lips tightened, her eyes flashing with fury. That night, Robert came by. Papers spread across the kitchen table, photos, printouts, screenshots. Robert tapped the stack. This isn't petty squabble anymore. It's systematic harassment, defamation, arson. This isn't civil, Jack. This is criminal. Jack slumped, voice hoarse. But will a court believe a black man over a polished white HOA chairwoman? Robert met his eyes, steel in his tone. They'll believe proof. And I'll make every page hit like a hammer. Buddy gave a low bark, as if in agreement. A week later, the local paper ran a headline, Harlan orchard burns again, Willow Creek residents alarmed. The photo showed a charred fence, Jack blurred in the background. No mention of suspects. Just one line repeated, the community fears an aging orchard may be a hazard. Jack held the paper, hands trembling. It felt like being burned again, not by fire, but by cold words. He didn't tear it. He slid it into the folder. He knew, when the day came, the fire wouldn't just consume his orchard. It would devour their lives. On the day of the trial, Texas skies were heavy with gray clouds. Jack wore an old suit, tie knotted awkwardly. He'd never been comfortable in formal clothes. He was used to work gear, or heavy turnout gear. But today, he had to wear a different kind of armor. Truth, the courtroom was packed. Half of Willow Creek was there, reporters crowding the halls. Jack caught glimpses of neighbors who once smiled buying apples from him, now turning away as if they didn't know him. Margaret entered in a spotless white coat, pearls gleaming. She looked like she was headed to a tea party, not a trial. Her Dallas lawyer leaned in, whispering, drawing a thin smile to her lips. The civil case began. Robert rose, opening a thick folder. Your Honor, this is not a petty neighborhood spat, This is a systematic campaign to drive Mr. Harland, a black former firefighter, off his ancestral land. He laid out evidence, fines, anonymous letters, photos of trash in the creek, slashed tires. Then, the video. The screen lit up. The room held its breath. A figure crouched, pouring liquid, flicking a lighter, flames rising. The stiff stride, rigid back. On the sleeve, firelight caught a streak of blue, the same windbreaker Margaret always wore. Gasps filled the room. A woman whispered, "My God, that's her." Margaret sat rigid, chin high, but her lips trembled. Then her lawyer rose, voice smooth as oil. "Your Honor, this so-called evidence came from a camera that invaded residents' privacy. It illegally spied on homes. How can we trust it?" He turned to Jack, voice sharp. "Mr. Harland, weren't you once called a black hero in the papers? And since then, haven't you believed people were against you because of your race?" Jack met his eyes, voice low, steady. "I don't need to be called a hero. I need the truth. And the truth is, someone brought fire into my orchard. I did not burn my father's land." The lawyer smirked. "You were angry over fines. You staged all this to play the race card, didn't you?" Whispers erupted. Robert shot up, voice thunderous. "Objection. That's not a question, that's an insult." The judge banged the gavel. Silence dropped like a weight. Then came the witness. Rick, the HOA treasurer, a skinny accountant, took the stand. His face was pale, hands shaking. I heard Mrs. Voss say in a closed meeting, "We can't let a black man hold land in the middle of our community. It ruins Willow Creek's image." The room exploded. Margaret whipped toward Rick, eyes blazing. But he kept his head down, voice breaking. "I swear, I didn't think she'd go that far. I thought, it was just words." Jack closed his eyes. What he'd known all along now rang out in public, cold and cutting. 3 hours later, the jury returned. The foreman read, "We find the defendant, Margaret Voss, guilty of arson and systematic harassment. Ordered to pay damages and face criminal charges." The gavel slammed like thunder. Margaret went pale, lips tight. Her lawyer wiped sweat from his brow. Robert's hand pressed Jack's shoulder. But Jack sat still, eyes on the window where the Texas light faded. He didn't smile. He only felt the weight. Outside, the crowd split. Some cheered, "Justice for Harland." Others muttered, "Just politics, just the race card." Jack walked out of court, noise swirling. His thoughts drifted to the burned orchard, to his father, to smoke, to the tender buds that never had a chance to grow. He'd won. But he knew, prejudice never truly lost. Spring came late, but it came. From the charred apple stumps, green shoots pushed through, small, fragile, but stubborn. Jack stood in the orchard, rough hand brushing tender bark, feeling sap rise deep in the soil. Buddy bounded around, nose to the rose, tail wagging. For the old hound, the orchard was still home, whether ash or green. Margaret's house at the end of the lane now sat abandoned. Grass grew tall, windows dusty. Her once glossy black Escalade had been repossessed. Rumor said she still held her chin high in prison, claiming she was framed. But no one believed. Willow Creek changed. The old HOA dissolved, a new council formed with promises of transparency. Neighbors who once kept silent now crossed over, carrying baskets of apples or bottles of wine, stammering apologies. "We were wrong to stay quiet," Jack nodded. He bore no grudge, but he didn't forget. Silence, sometimes, was more dangerous than fire. One evening, Robert visited. They sat on the porch, sipping tea. Robert said, "You won, Jack. 6-figure damages, a criminal conviction. Not many can say that." Jack gave a thin smile. "Won? Half my father's orchard is ash. And still, some say I just played the race card." Robert was quiet, then clapped his shoulder. "But you stood up. You didn't let them burn the truth." Jack gazed at the green shoots, eyes softening. On Sunday, he opened the gate, hung a small sign, "Harland Orchard, first spring apples." People came, children laughed, plucking apples still tarred and green. A young mother stopped, eyes wet. "I once sided with Mrs. Voss. I thought you didn't belong in Willow Creek." "I'm sorry." Jack handed the child beside her a small apple. "Let her grow up in a neighborhood without invisible fences. Only ones that divide green apples from red." The woman wept, nodding. As the sun set, Jack sat alone. Ash remained, but shoots were growing. He knew, victory wasn't the money or the sentence. Victory was still standing, still rooted. He lifted his gaze, voice low but firm, as if speaking to more than the orchard. "Justice isn't only in courtrooms. It's in how we treat each other. In the courage to say no when something's wrong. And in refusing to let silence feed the fire of prejudice." Buddy barked softly, trotting the fence line. The orchard whispered in the wind. Ash still lingered. But from ash, new life rose, and Jack's call was not just for Willow Creek, but for every place where invisible fences of bias still stand.